In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Amidst the cacophony of war, some units rise above the rest. In the Imperial Guard, few stand as tall as the Cadian Shock Troopers. They are not superhuman, nor do they pilot Titans. Rather, for 10,000 years, they have been the backbone of the Imperium, an unbending bulwark against the galaxy's evils. We delve into what made them legendary. We begin with their homeworld. Cadia. Not just a backwater world. Cadia was on the front line, stationed at the edge of the Eye of Terror, the galaxy's largest warp rift. It was here that the full fury of chaos was felt, from demons to heretics, to the armies of the traitor legions. Every day, Cadia had to repel these attacks, so the Cadia system became a fortress. Its cities were designed for defense, its landscape dotted with automated gun emplacements, orbital bombardment cannons, and miles of trenches. In such an environment, its people were bred to fight. They were drilled in martial arts from birth. Games were mock drills. Education focused on tactics and strategy. By the time they reached maturity, every man and woman was a warrior. There was no conscription. Everyone served whether they liked it or not. This created an army unlike any other. Other Imperial Guard regiments might crack under fire, but the Cadians held. When others broke and fled, Cadians stood firm. Weapons didn't matter much to them. They had no fancy particle weapons or high-tech armor. They relied on lasguns, bayonets, and flak armor, making the common soldier as expendable as the ammunition they fired. Yet they used this to their advantage. Because the Cadia system was in constant danger of invasion, the inhabitants learned to fight in perfect formation and absolute unison. They were taught to compensate for the shortcomings of their weapons and armor. They fought with flawless coordination, turning the simplest rifle into a deadly tool. A single lasgun blast might not do much damage, but a volley of perfectly aimed shots could mow down entire squads of enemies. And if the enemy managed to get past the initial volley, they would find themselves facing a wall of steel. The shock troopers were known for their discipline and steadfastness. They wouldn't break and run. They would stand their ground and fight to the last man. That was the way of the shock trooper. Soon, the Cadian regiments became the standard by which all other Imperial troops were judged. No other guardsman could hold a candle to them. This was the long-awaited answer to the Emperor's prayer. When he created the Adeptus Custodes and the Adeptus Astra, his wish was to have an army so strong that no foe could best them, an army that could stand against chaos. But now it seemed as if the Emperor had found what he was looking for. On the parade grounds of Terra, the shock troopers put on displays of coordinated shooting in close combat that drew gasps of awe from spectators. At the height of their glory, Terra Wereobe, 300 active shock trooper regiments, each with its own unique designation, but all bearing the proud sigil of Cadia. For example, there was the 27th, 54th, and 87th Cadian regiments. But while the Cadia system was the birthplace of the shock troopers, their homeworld was merely the most prominent. As the shock troopers grew in number and fame, regiments were raised from all across the sector. So many that there were more Cadian regiments than worlds in the Cadia sector. Over time, they became a galactic institution, fighting in nearly every major conflict throughout the Great Crusade. And the Horus Heresy, they gained a reputation as the Emperor's finest, the Imperium's unassailable bulwark against the foes of mankind. But their greatest test was yet to come. With the galaxy thrown into chaos by Horus's rebellion, the enemies of the Imperium surged forward. The traitor legion swept across the galaxy, tearing the Emperor's forces apart. Yet the shock troopers stood firm. Wherever the traitors went, shock troopers followed, repelling attack after attack, killing Chaos Space Marine after Chaos Space Marine. Eventually, the galaxy was plunged into darkness as Horus and the traitors won victory after victory. Finally, the traitors set their sights on the Cadia system. With the entire loyalist fleet gone, the Cadia system was extremely vulnerable. But then, something remarkable happened. Desperate times call for desperate measures. So the Emperor took a handful of space wolves and Imperial fists, and sent them to aid the shock troopers. Though outnumbered and outgunned, the combined forces of the Space Marines and the shock troopers held off wave after wave of the traitors. Together, they killed thousands of demons, heretics, and traitors. Among them was the World Eater's champion Korgoth. He dueled with a Kion captain and slew him, only to be slain himself by the enraged Kion lieutenant, who then died from wounds sustained during the battle. During the siege, there was much anticipation for the arrival of the traitor warlords. In particular, the shock troopers wanted a chance to fight the Blood Angels, Lionel Gunson, and Lorgar. Unfortunately, the three traitors never arrived. Instead, the siege ended abruptly when reinforcements finally arrived and drove the traitors away. For the shock troopers, this wasn't a victory to celebrate. They had held against the traitors, yes, but at what cost? Almost every soldier was dead. Those who survived the siege were so traumatized that many deserted or went insane. The once vaunted Cadian Shock Troopers were gone, destroyed in the siege. Yet before long, new shock troopers took up arms to defend Cadia. Despite being green recruits, they too proved themselves worthy of their forebears, eventually growing to match the glory of old. But their real test came around the 31st millennium, when the forces of chaos known as the Black Crusades threatened to engulf the galaxy. Wave after wave of enemies crashed against the chaos system, but none could break the lines of the shock troopers. The orcs weren't able to punch through the shock trooper lines. The Tyranids were decimated by their steady volleys, and chaos space marines and demons were slain in droves. But all the while, the enemies grew bolder and stronger. By the 41st millennium, the Black Crusades were led by no less a figure than Abaddon, the War Master of Chaos. Under his leadership, the enemies pressed their assaults, eventually forcing the shock troopers back. Even then, they refused to yield. They kept fighting until the bitter end, repelling attack after attack, taking enemy after enemy with them. Then came the final blow. Abaddon unleashed his secret weapon, the Blackstone Fortress. He smashed the planet-sized fortress into Cadia, splitting the world in two. Still, the shock troopers kept fighting, even as their world crumbled beneath them. Cities were leveled, mountains crumbled, and the shock troopers stood firm until the very end. So how did the Cadia system fall? It wasn't because the shock troopers ran out of ammo, gave up, or surrendered. The fall of Cadia was caused by the death of the planet itself. The Blackstone Fortress split the world in two, ending all resistance. As the world was dying, so were the shock troopers, but not without honor. They had bought the Imperium precious time, enough for the survivors to escape and regroup. The shock troopers' last stand was a resounding success. They had defeated the traitors and bought the galaxy time, sacrificing themselves to save countless lives. Though the shock troopers were gone, their spirit lived on in the survivors, who went on to form new regiments across the galaxy. Cadia might be lost, but the shock troopers' fight goes on. After Cadia's destruction, the Cadia shock troopers ceased to exist as a cohesive fighting force. Any surviving shock troopers not killed in the battle either evacuated with the civilians or joined new regiments. There were also several successor regiments, such as the Vostrian Firstborn Mordian 8th and Valhallan 46th, who traced their lineage back to the shock troopers. Yet despite this, the term Cadia Shock Troopers still lives on. Surviving veterans of the original shock trooper regiments continued to use the title, keeping the memory of their former comrades alive. Besides, no other regiment was worthy of the name. Today, the Cadia Shock Troopers are a thing of legend, a testament to the power of human will and discipline. They prove that even the most advanced technology cannot compare to the power of an unbroken fighting force. They were a shining beacon of hope in the darkest hours of the 41st millennium, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity will never surrender. The Cadia Shock Troopers may be gone, but their story will never be forgotten. Their deeds will echo through the annals of the Imperial Guard, inspiring future generations to stand firm against the galaxy's evils.